Stop! Step back and listen.
I'm walking down my street. You got no right.
I said freeze. Don't make this worse.
I'm not going anywhere. Leave me alone.
You think you can talk to me like that? I can detain you.
Try it. You're harassing me for nothing.
The evening air was thick with tension as Jamal Harris walked down his own street, earbuds in, backpack slung over one shoulder, expecting nothing more than the familiar sights of his neighborhood, the rustle of leaves, the hum of distant traffic, the occasional greeting from a neighbor. But tonight, the familiar became foreign. Ahead, the figure of Officer Ethan Briggs loomed, uniform sharp, badge gleaming in the fading light, posture rigid, chest out, as if claiming the street itself. Without warning, Briggs stepped directly into Jamal's path, feet planted wide, shoulders squared, blocking the sidewalk completely. There was no greeting, no explanation, no evening, sir. Only authority manifest in human form, aggressive and unyielding. Jamal halted, heart quickening, eyes wide. He recognized the uniform. He recognized the authority. But he also recognized the injustice unfolding before him. The body cam of the second officer captured the entire scene. The fisheye lens slightly warped the edges, bending the houses and sidewalk into a distorted cage. Both figures were centered in frame. Jamal, standing tall, fists unclenched but tension visible in every muscle, mouth wide open, voice carrying across the street. Briggs, rigid, voice clipped and loud, fully projected, hands gesturing in sharp, punctuated commands. Every syllable, every gesture, was magnified by the lens, creating a sense of claustrophobic immediacy. Stop. Step back and listen. Briggs barked, voice cutting through the quiet evening. His words weren't a request. They were a declaration of control. I'm walking down my street. You got no right. Jamal shouted back, his chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. His voice cracked with anger, fear, and disbelief all at once. The words spilled out, unfiltered, raw, a challenge to authority that seemed absolute. Briggs took a step closer, shoulders slightly forward, projecting menace. I said freeze. Don't make this worse, he yelled, teeth clenched, eyes locked on the teen. Every movement was deliberate, each phrase intended to dominate. I'm not going anywhere. Leave me alone. Jamal shot back, voice louder now, trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and indignation. His hands remained visible, not threatening, but his posture screamed resistance. He was cornered, both physically and socially, yet refusing to submit. You think you can talk to me like that? I can detain you. Briggs escalated, leaning in, authority weaponized as threat, his mouth wide, fully projecting dominance over a space Jamal had every right to occupy. Try it. You're harassing me for nothing. The teen's voice echoed across the street. His words were defiance, fear, and incredulity all in one. Every passerby, even those hidden behind drawn curtains, could feel the tension. Every syllable demanded justice, even in the absence of any formal recourse at that very moment. Neighbors peeked from windows, some stopping to watch, some recording on their phones, all silent witnesses to the clash of authority and right. The fisheye lens captured the street like a stage, amplifying every inch of the confrontation. Every shout, every motion, every tense shift of weight between the two figures became exaggerated, monumental, impossible to ignore. The teen's breathing was rapid, words spilling in bursts of indignation, frustration, and anger. The officer's commands were sharp, clipped, relentless, trying to assert control in the absence of justification. There was no car pulling up, no third-party POV to soften the scene. Only the raw, unfiltered exchange, magnified by the lens, fully open mouth shouting, full-throttle emotion. In those first moments, the audience feels the immediacy of fear and frustration. The air itself seemed charged. Authority collided with youth, expectation collided with injustice, and the familiar streets became a theater of intimidation. The teen's stance, upright, defiant, yet visibly anxious, contrasted sharply with the officer's rigid aggression. Every second, every word, every shout communicated the raw truth. Jamal was simply walking home, yet he was treated like a criminal, threatened with detention, humiliated, and confronted in a space that should have been safe. The Bodycam lens recorded it all, freezing the moment where everyday life intersected with abuse of authority, where fear and anger met disbelief, and where a teen's rights were challenged in the most personal of spaces, his own neighborhood. Jamal Harris was not looking for confrontation. At 16, he lived a life that was structured, disciplined, and ordinary, the kind of ordinary that rarely makes headlines. He was an honors student at the local high school, maintaining a GPA his teachers praised, often tutoring classmates after school in math and science. His basketball coach described him as focused, hardworking, and respectful, the kind of kid who never caused trouble and never sought attention, only improvement. In his neighborhood, Jamal was equally well known. Neighbors knew him by name. They saw him walking to the corner store or practicing layups in the driveway. He greeted everyone politely, always careful to be respectful and considerate. Parents across the street would nod when he passed. Kids his age would high-five him on the basketball court, and the mail carrier always commented on how courteous he was. Polite, predictable, safe. In every sense, he fit the profile of a teen who posed no threat. At home, the picture was the same. His parents, David and Latoya Harris, instilled a strong sense of responsibility, respect, and awareness of the world around him. They taught him to value education, to treat others fairly, and to understand his rights, but also to navigate the world carefully. Jamal's life was a balance of school, sports, friends, and family, a normal teenage existence that, until this incident, involved no brushes with the law, no warnings from school administrators, no neighborhood complaints. He was also a child of a community that, for decades, had learned caution around authority. His parents emphasized conversations about safety, about staying calm, about knowing one's rights, lessons shaped by both love and lived experience. But Jamal had never expected that knowledge to be tested in the place he knew best, his own neighborhood. The street he walked every day, the sidewalk where he played as a younger child, the block lined with familiar homes. All of it suddenly became a stage for intimidation and fear. On the evening of the confrontation, Jamal's ordinary life collided violently with the extraordinary assertion of authority. As Officer Briggs blocked him, shouting commands, threatening detention, and escalating aggression, the contrast was stark. Here was a teen who had never broken a law, who had never been involved in a police investigation, who carried no record, standing in the middle of his own street, being treated as if he were a criminal. Each shout from Briggs amplified the absurdity of the situation. Each shout from Jamal carried frustration, fear, and a desperate insistence on his right to exist in his own space. Even his friends and classmates, hearing the video later, were stunned. Jamal wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't someone who provoked confrontation. Yet the scene captured by the fisheye bodycam suggested the opposite, a teen treated with hostility simply for being present. And the emotional weight of that disparity, of normalcy facing aggression, was heavy. The audience immediately recognizes the injustice. A young life interrupted, a neighborhood that should be safe transformed into a stage for fear and authority exercised without reason. David and Latoya Harris described their son in the strongest terms. Respectful, intelligent, disciplined. A normal kid whose only crime was being black in a society that sometimes preemptively views black teens as threats. They emphasized that Jamal had followed rules his entire life, respected adults, and worked hard to build a reputation of integrity. To see him shouting back at a uniformed officer wasn't defiance without cause. It was self-preservation, a reaction to harassment in a space that should have offered safety and familiarity. The contrast between Jamal's ordinary life and the aggression he faced made the confrontation even more striking. The street where he had grown up, where he knew every crack in the sidewalk and the rhythm of passing neighbors, became a battlefield. The audience sees not just a teen yelling, not just an officer shouting. They see innocence confronted with power, discipline facing unchecked authority, and normalcy violently interrupted. This setup, this glimpse into Jamal Harris's life, is essential for viewers to understand what's at stake. He is not a statistic, not a suspect, not a provocateur. He is a young man with dreams, routines, and responsibilities. He is ordinary, yet his ordinary life was violated in the most extraordinary way. The contrast drives the narrative. 1 minute, a teen walking home. The next, a confrontation that escalates, captured in raw, aggressive detail by the second officer's body cam. The confrontation didn't come out of nowhere. On paper, it had a reason, at least according to Officer Ethan Briggs. Briggs would later claim that he was responding to a suspicious activity call, a tip from an anonymous source. But what exactly that meant was never clarified. No neighbors had called about a disturbance. No crime had been reported. No one had seen Jamal do anything out of the ordinary. The tip itself was vague, unsubstantiated, and seemingly arbitrary. In reality, Jamal was simply walking home, backpack on one shoulder, earbuds still tucked in, sneakers tapping the pavement in a familiar rhythm. This was a teen following the exact routine he had maintained for years, the same route he had walked countless times, the same sidewalks where friends met him after school, where neighbors waved hello. Nothing about his behavior that evening suggested wrongdoing. Nothing about his presence warranted a confrontation, let alone threats of detention. Yet Briggs chose to intercept him, escalate, and block his path, turning a normal walk into a standoff captured on Bodycam. The second officer, standing just a few feet behind Briggs, remained passive throughout. His Bodycam lens captured every inch of the tension, the wide-angle fisheye showing both figures, their wide-open mouths shouting, each word hanging in the suburban air. Yet he offered no intervention, no verbal support for the teen, no attempt to de-escalate. Briggs acted with unilateral authority, unchecked, and the presence of a second officer did nothing to slow him down. The silence of that second officer spoke volumes. Procedure was secondary, escalation was primary, and the target of suspicion was a black teen walking home. Every movement, every word, every gesture during those moments underscored the central question. Why Jamal? Why was this teen, known in his community for his discipline and respect, suddenly viewed as a threat? There were no prior incidents, no warnings, no suspicious behavior. He had never been involved in police investigations, never been reprimanded at school for fighting or truancy, never displayed aggression toward anyone. He was not a criminal, not a provocateur, just a 16-year-old boy moving through his own neighborhood. And yet Briggs had decided, based solely on a vague tip, to confront him aggressively, to shout commands, to threaten detention, turning a routine walk into a tense, public spectacle. The timing and location amplified the absurdity and injustice. This was early evening, a time when most teens would be returning from school, sports, or friends' homes. The neighborhood was quiet, streets lined with familiar homes, no disturbances anywhere in sight. Every passerby, every neighbor who glanced out their window, saw a scene that made little sense. A uniformed officer screaming at a teen on the sidewalk, the teen shouting back, fully defiant, yet clearly unarmed and compliant in all physical terms. The camera captured it all, the tension, the aggression, the imbalance of power, leaving the audience to ask the same question repeatedly. Why Jamal? And it wasn't just the absence of evidence that mattered. It was the broader social context. Jamal's community, like many, had long understood the unspoken rules, that young black men are often scrutinized more heavily, assumed to be threats where others are not. The anonymous tip may have been innocent, even mistaken, but it activated biases that Briggs carried into the encounter. He acted not on facts, but on perception, on assumption, on the authority granted to him by the badge he wore. That dynamic, assumption over evidence, is what would later fuel outrage, legal action, and national attention. The encounter also underscored systemic weaknesses. Policies on suspicious activity, tips often leave wide discretion to officers in the field. Without clear standards, without supervision, the decision to confront someone becomes subjective, and when combined with implicit bias, the results can be devastating. Briggs' choice to escalate, coupled with the inaction of the second officer, highlights how quickly a routine patrol can become harassment, how quickly a neighborhood can become a stage for intimidation, and how easily a teen can be cast as the villain in his own story. By the time this moment ended, the audience already grasps the stakes. This was no misunderstanding in a store or on a crowded street. This was a teen walking home in the neighborhood he knew best, confronted by a man in uniform who assumed threat where none existed, who threatened detention without cause, and who elevated a minor tip into a full-scale standoff. Every second of video, every shout, every tense pause reinforces the absurdity and the injustice, driving home the question, why Jamal? Why him? In his own space, with nothing to justify the escalation. It's in this context that the narrative shifts from simple confrontation to civil rights issue. The audience begins to understand that this incident is not just about one officer and one teen. It is about discretion exercised without accountability, about assumptions over facts, and about the terrifying reality that ordinary, law-abiding young people can become targets simply because of who they are and where they are. The neighborhood, usually safe and familiar, becomes a theater of intimidation. Jamal's ordinary walk is reframed as defiance, and the law-abiding teen now faces a situation designed to intimidate, recorded for all the world to see on the second officer's fisheye bodycam. The tension on the street escalated with every heartbeat. Officer Ethan Briggs, uniform tight, chest forward, fists clenched at his sides, barked his commands again and again. Stop. Freeze. Don't move another step. His voice cut sharply through the quiet neighborhood, echoing off the houses, carrying a sharp authority that demanded compliance, but offered no explanation. Every word, every syllable, was delivered fully open-mouthed, teeth clenched, projecting aggression like armor. Jamal Harris didn't move backward. He didn't crouch, didn't try to hide, didn't run. He planted his feet, shoulders squared, jaw tight, breathing fast, chest rising and falling with the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he shouted, voice cracking with a mixture of fear, defiance, and anger. "I'm walking home. Leave me alone." Every word was captured on the second officer's fisheye bodycam, magnified by the lens's wide distortion, making the confrontation feel immediate, unavoidable, and tense. Briggs stepped closer, moving with intent, gesturing sharply toward Jamal. "I can detain you," he shouted, mouth wide, voice booming. "You think you can talk to me like that? Step aside or face consequences." His tone was threatening, designed to intimidate, to dominate, to make the teen appear guilty simply by fear of compliance. But Jamal refused to be silenced. "You can try. I'm not moving." His fists were unclenched, body tense, stance defensive but nonviolent. His words rang out to the neighbors watching from windows and porches, to the friends who had stopped on bikes or curbs, and to the phones capturing the scene from afar. The defiance was palpable, a combination of righteous anger, confusion, and the human instinct to resist being cornered. As the verbal exchange continued, the bodycam recorded everything: Briggs' sharp, clipped orders, his threats of detention, the aggressive forward steps, the repeated assertion of authority. Every threat hung in the air, punctuated by Jamal's shouts, his refusal to back down, and the tension between youth and unchecked power. The camera captured the teen's wide-open mouth, the intensity in his eyes, the defiance in every movement. And it captured Briggs' fully open-mouthed aggression, the rigid posture, the calculated intimidation of a man who had the law on his side, at least in title, but no justification in reality. The neighborhood itself became a backdrop for the escalating drama. Windows opened, neighbors peered cautiously, some held phones up to film, unsure if they were witnessing a criminal act or an abuse of authority. Even the quiet suburban street, normally filled with the sounds of birds and distant traffic, became a theater of tension, amplified by every shout, every threat, every refusal. The bodycam's fisheye lens stretched the scene, warping the sidewalk, houses, and trees into a distorted, almost surreal stage where every movement carried outsized weight. Briggs continued to escalate. "I will detain you if you don't comply," he yelled, voice full of force, projecting certainty that his authority was absolute. But Jamal's defiance did not waver. "I'm not doing anything wrong. You're harassing me," he shouted back, voice cracking with emotion, but still controlled, still standing, still alive to the principles of fairness and justice that had been taught at home. Every second of this verbal confrontation emphasized the imbalance of power. Jamal was unarmed, alone, a 16-year-old walking home. Briggs carried a badge, a weapon, and the implicit authority of law enforcement. Yet the teen's courage, amplified by the bodycam lens, made the officer's aggression undeniable. Each command, each threat, each shout was captured, documented, and undeniable. Neighbors began to murmur, some whispering, "This isn't right," some filming silently. Their presence did little to calm Briggs, who was now fully engaged in asserting dominance. His movements, though exaggerated by his own adrenaline, conveyed menace. His words, repeated and amplified, suggested that Jamal's very presence in his own neighborhood was unacceptable. Jamal's responses, loud, clear, and defiant, became his shield. Each shout, each refusal to move, each verbal challenge to Briggs' authority was an assertion of his right to exist in his own space without intimidation. He was fully aware of the imbalance, fully aware that the law technically supported the officer, but he also understood that morality and fairness were on his side. The bodycam captured the tension perfectly, wide-angle, distorted, unflinching, showing both figures in aggressive stances, both shouting, both unwilling to yield. In these moments, the audience feels the raw, uncomfortable truth of the encounter. This is no minor misunderstanding. It's an escalation of authority unchecked, a young man's rights threatened in the place he should feel safest, his own neighborhood. The shouting, the intimidation, the aggressive postures, all fully captured by the bodycam, make the tension unbearable and the injustice unmistakable. The shouting had drawn attention. Doors opened, blinds lifted, and neighbors peered cautiously from windows and porches. Jamal Harris stood in the middle of his street, fists still relaxed but body rigid with tension, breathing heavy, chest heaving. His voice, previously filled with defiance, began to quiver as Officer Briggs continued to advance, shouting threats, gesturing aggressively, insisting that he could be detained for disobeying orders. "You don't get to walk down the street like that. Step back now," Briggs yelled, fully open mouth, voice booming. His words carried across the quiet evening, ricocheting off brick and siding, amplified by the authority of the badge he wore. Jamal's replies were loud, firm, yet increasingly edged with strain. "I'm on my street. You have no reason to stop me," he shouted, his voice cracking, a mix of fear and righteous anger. The audience can feel the humiliation seeping in as Jamal's surroundings became witnesses to an encounter that should never have happened. Neighbors watched silently, some gripping phones, unsure whether to intervene or record, unsure how a quiet street had become the scene of public intimidation. Jamal's ordinary life, walks home from school, afternoons spent shooting hoops, casual conversations with friends, was violently interrupted in full view of his community. Every shout from Briggs felt like a challenge to Jamal's existence, a public assertion of power over someone completely innocent. Moments later, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. David and Latoya Harris, Jamal's parents, arrived on the scene, faces pale with alarm, breaths quick from running down the street. They had heard the commotion, saw the officer looming over their son, and instinctively knew the danger, not just physical, but emotional, reputational, and systemic. "Officer, what are you doing to my son?" David shouted, voice trembling but firm, approaching with arms slightly raised. Latoya followed closely, calling out, "You can't treat him like this. He's a kid." Their voices, though loud, were measured compared to the clipped, harsh barks of Briggs, who now fully ignored them. Briggs, eyes narrowed, voice rising again, dismissed them almost reflexively. "Step back. This doesn't concern you right now. I am in control." He continued to shout at Jamal, every command punctuated with aggression, fully open mouth, tone sharp as a whip. The bodycam captured it all, parents in mid-shout, teens standing his ground, the officer unwavering in his display of authority. Despite the parents' presence, Briggs' aggression did not diminish. He gestured, leaning forward, asserting dominance in a way that left the teens' parents momentarily powerless. The words were designed to intimidate. Threats of detention, suggestions of criminality, constant repetition of commands to freeze or stop, all directed at a 16-year-old who had done nothing wrong. Each command escalated the emotional weight of the encounter. Jamal's body trembled slightly, adrenaline still coursing, but his defiance remained. He looked to his parents for support, eyes wide with a mix of fear and frustration. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he shouted again, voice rising. "You're harassing me." But the aggression from Briggs was relentless, leaving the teen visibly shaken, standing in the middle of his own street as though under siege. The neighbors' reactions added to the sense of public humiliation. Phones recorded every movement. Whispers traveled through the street, and some residents stepped onto porches or sidewalks, unsure how to intervene. Jamal's ordinary existence, the boy who played basketball, who walked home safely for years, who greeted everyone politely, was now defined in that moment by confrontation, fear, and intimidation. The bodycam captured subtle details that heightened the emotional impact. The teen's fists, unclenched but ready, shaking slightly. The parents' rising panic. Briggs' exaggerated gestures. The distant hum of the neighborhood, now a background to chaos. Every frame emphasized the imbalance of power, the terror of being publicly humiliated in a space that should have been safe. As the confrontation continued, the audience feels the weight of helplessness. Jamal cannot escape without defying authority. The parent's presence does not halt the officer, and the neighborhood watches silently. The teen's fear, anger, and humiliation are compounded by the knowledge that others are witnessing it unfold, powerless to intervene. Every shout from Briggs reinforces that Jamal is treated not as a child in his own neighborhood, but as a suspect in a fabricated narrative of threat. Within hours of the confrontation, the neighborhood videos began to surface. Phones captured every second of the street-level encounter, shaky angles from porches, a neighbor's zoomed-in lens from the driveway, and, most importantly, the second officer's fisheye bodycam. The footage told a story the official reports could not. Jamal Harris was physically compliant. His hands were visible at all times, unclenched. He did not lunge, he did not threaten, he did not touch the officer. The only aggression recorded was his voice, loud, indignant, fully open-mouthed, shouting in self-defense, pushing back verbally against intimidation. The bodycam perspective made it impossible to ignore the imbalance. Briggs dominated the frame. Chest out, arms gesturing aggressively, mouth open, voice harsh and clipped with repeated commands. Jamal was smaller in comparison, tense but contained, shouting back for clarity, for rights, for space. Each syllable, each motion, captured in the distorted wide-angle lens, underscored the contrast between authority and innocence. The camera picked up the minor tremor in Jamal's shoulders, the shallow, rapid breathing, and the way he pivoted slightly to keep distance without retreating, all signals of fear, all consistent with compliance under duress. Meanwhile, neighbors' footage added context. One video captured from across the street showed the entirety of the confrontation. The teen's defiance framed by the suburban houses, parents arriving moments later, bystanders frozen mid-step, phones held up, whispers audible in the background. Another video caught the repeated gestures and full-mouthed shouting of Briggs, emphasizing just how aggressive the officer's approach was. In contrast, Jamal's reactions were entirely verbal and defensive. No officer action triggered physical retaliation. Nothing in the teen's behavior justified the threats of detention repeated across multiple angles. When investigators and journalists reviewed the footage, the contradictions became immediately apparent. Officer Briggs' official report described the encounter as a resistant suspect refusing lawful orders, a narrative that implied hostility and criminal intent. The reports suggested a teen escalating aggression, threatening the officer, and ignoring commands. But the combined footage told a completely different story. The teen never advanced toward Briggs, never raised his fists in aggression, never attempted to flee in a way that could be considered evasive or threatening. His body language was tense, but entirely defensive, his verbal shouting clearly a response to escalating intimidation. The contrast between reality and narrative was stark. Each frame of the bodycam video contradicted the officer's written account. Commands were repeated aggressively. The teen complied physically but argued verbally. Neighbors looked on in disbelief. The footage also highlighted the passivity of the second officer, standing in the frame, chest-level bodycam capturing everything, but failing to intervene, failing to de-escalate, simply recording. The imbalance was undeniable. Within the neighborhood and on social media, the footage began to spread. Clips posted to local groups, then larger platforms, showed Jamal's defiance not as criminality, but as the understandable reaction of a teenager being harassed. Audiences across the city, and then nationally, reacted with outrage. Comments poured in. Disbelief at the officer's escalation, sympathy for the teen, condemnation of the public humiliation, and anger at the systemic nature of such confrontations. Parents shared links in local parent groups, Community leaders demanded statements, and the viral spread forced attention from media outlets who had not yet covered the story. Every new angle amplified the story. Fisheye bodycam footage showing the teen's hands visible, upright posture, defensive movements, handheld phones capturing the shouting, the wide stance, the verbal pushback, the officer leaning forward, fully open-mouthed, threats repeated over and over. The combined visual evidence made it impossible to argue that the teen's conduct justified the harassment. The public could see clearly. Jamal was a compliant teen, subjected to intimidation in the middle of his own neighborhood. By the time the footage had circulated for hours, Officer Briggs' narrative began to collapse. Local law enforcement was forced to acknowledge that the body cam and neighbor videos directly contradicted their report. Public outrage escalated, fueled by clear evidence of abuse, visible in multiple angles, all captured in real time. Jamal's parents posted a side-by-side comparison of the report versus the footage, further highlighting discrepancies. The videos didn't just show what happened, they documented how it happened: the verbal abuse, the threats of detention, the complete disregard for the teen's rights, and the utter passivity of the second officer. Each upload reinforced the truth, and every share amplified awareness. This was not an isolated misunderstanding. This was harassment, publicly documented, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Neighbors continued posting short clips, breaking down the audio, the repeated commands, the shouting, the intimidation, while viewers pointed out the teen's calm but firm posture, the absence of any physical resistance, and the absurdity of the situation. The viral attention created pressure not only on the officers, but on the department and the city. The footage was irrefutable. The teen had been harassed, threatened, and publicly humiliated, and the video evidence left no room for alternate narratives. By the end of this sequence, the public knew the truth. The body cam and neighbor footage aligned perfectly. Jamal Harris had done nothing to warrant the aggression. The officer's report was proven false. The teen's defiance was a natural response to intimidation, not criminal behavior. The stage was now set for legal action, accountability, and a fight for justice that could no longer be ignored. After the videos went viral, the Harris family wasted no time. The humiliation, the fear, the public spectacle. It was clear that this was not just a personal incident, but a civil rights violation. David and LaToya Harris reached out to an experienced civil rights attorney, someone familiar with cases of police misconduct and harassment. The goal was not only accountability, but justice. The recognition that a 16-year-old had been threatened, intimidated, and emotionally traumatized for simply existing in his own neighborhood. The attorney filed a formal lawsuit on behalf of Jamal and his parents. The complaint detailed multiple claims: unlawful harassment, racial profiling, emotional distress, and violation of constitutional rights. Central to the case was the Fourth Amendment, the right to be free from unreasonable detention or coercion by law enforcement. The Harris family's legal team emphasized that Jamal had been fully compliant physically, that he had done nothing to warrant police intervention, and that the officer's threats and intimidation were entirely unprovoked. The filing also addressed the broader context. Officer Ethan Briggs had a history of complaints. Internal reports, uncovered during discovery, revealed that previous encounters with teens and young adults, particularly black youth, had been marked by similar patterns: aggressive confrontation, exaggerated reports, threats of detention, and public intimidation. While these prior complaints were largely dismissed internally, the cumulative evidence painted a picture of repeated misconduct. The lawsuit underscored that this was not an isolated mistake, but part of a pattern, and Jamal had become the latest target. The legal documents meticulously referenced the bodycam footage and neighbor videos, highlighting discrepancies between the officer's written reports and the visual evidence. Where Briggs' report claimed that Jamal ignored commands and resisted detention, the videos clearly showed a teen shouting in self-defense, hands visible, posture tense but non-threatening, never advancing or touching the officer. The second officer, present but passive, was noted as having failed to intervene, reinforcing the lack of checks and balances during the incident. The lawsuit also called out systemic issues: vague protocols for suspicious activity calls, discretionary authority left unchecked, and the lack of oversight on officers with prior complaints. The Harris legal team argued that Jamal's age, behavior, and the lack of credible threat should have prevented any confrontation, and that the harassment he endured caused measurable emotional distress. Media outlets quickly picked up the story, fueled by the viral videos and the detailed legal filing. Local news highlighted the discrepancies between the officer's account and the footage. National publications noted the implications of racial profiling and abuse of power. Public opinion surged in favor of Jamal and his family. Social media commentary expressed outrage, with many noting that a law-abiding teen had been subjected to aggressive harassment in front of his own home, an environment that should have been safe and familiar. Faced with mounting legal pressure and the undeniable evidence captured on Bodycam and by neighbors, the city and police department entered settlement negotiations. The Harris family's attorneys emphasized not only financial compensation, but systemic changes to prevent similar incidents. They demanded clear protocols for neighborhood interactions, mandatory de-escalation training, and stricter oversight of officers with repeated complaints. After weeks of negotiation, a settlement was reached, $1 million awarded to the Harris family. The settlement was public, transparent, and significant enough to reflect the gravity of the harassment, the emotional trauma inflicted, and the broader implications for civil rights protections in everyday neighborhoods. Officer Briggs was removed from patrol duty pending further review and required to undergo additional training in de-escalation and bias awareness. The city committed to revising protocols for suspicious activity, calls, and increased accountability measures for officers interacting with minors. The settlement also sent a broader message. Even in ordinary neighborhoods, ordinary moments, a teen walking home from school, a kid moving through his community, can become high-stakes confrontations when authority is unchecked. Legal recourse is available, but only when families, communities, and attorneys act to hold perpetrators accountable. The Harris family emphasized that their goal was not revenge but justice, ensuring that other teens would not experience the same fear and humiliation. Throughout the legal process, Jamal's demeanor remained steadfast. Despite the public scrutiny and repeated viewing of his most vulnerable moments, he displayed courage and composure, qualities that underscored the injustice of what he had endured. His parents expressed relief that the law had ultimately recognized the violation of their child's rights and acknowledged the emotional harm caused by a wholly avoidable incident. The $1 million settlement was more than a financial award, it was validation. It confirmed that the harassment Jamal endured was unjustified, documented, and legally actionable. It highlighted the importance of evidence, bodycam footage, neighbor recordings, and accurate documentation in holding authority accountable. The outcome also demonstrated the critical role of civil rights law in protecting ordinary citizens from extraordinary abuse of power. For viewers, the narrative resonates far beyond the Harris family. It's a story about ordinary life interrupted by unchecked authority, about the courage of a teen standing his ground, and about the power of evidence to expose misconduct. The legal resolution serves as a reminder that even in situations where intimidation is public, aggressive, and fully captured on camera, there is recourse, and that accountability, while not immediate, is possible.